Hey guys, Fernando doing another video for More Survivalist, and in this case I think we've reached the point where we can make a very clear picture of the current state of the war in Ukraine. We have enough footage, enough information from different sources, and when you have, it's not just about this is not about the ghost of Kiev kind of thing, right? No, when you have different sources and you get a more clear idea, a better picture of the reality of how this is going, then I feel that we can make a certain appreciation. And the appreciation we can make is that, first of all, communism, socialism is a massive big lie. It is just bullshit. And this is what I was explaining in my previous video. If you haven't gone through this, if you haven't seen your own country collapse to socialism, to communism, to that level of absolute corruption, you just cannot understand how bad it is. I know because I've gone through that. I know because I've gone through having a government telling us that, yes, $200 million spent on roads. How many roads did you buy with $200 million? None, zero, not a mile actually made. That's the kind of corruption that I'm talking about, and you guys don't go through that. You haven't experienced that yourselves. So when you look at things like these, like thousands of mobilized Russians sent home, deemed unfit for duty, right? Or when you see stuff like this, well, 1.5 million Russian uniforms missing. Where are the uniforms? Maybe they were stolen. Maybe they were sold on eBay. Maybe they were sold to another nation. Maybe they were not even made to begin with. The money was just stolen. You guys have no idea how bad socialism is when it comes to, and you see this in China and Venezuela. Now, it is true that China seems to have their act a little bit better together in terms of actual, and it's maybe because of being like more of an ant colony, single communist party system. In the case of Russia, it's more extreme in terms of not only the power of the state is absolute, that's what socialism, that's what communism is. You can use both words interchangeably for practical purposes, at least in our current times. It's just the absolute power of the state. And in the case of Russia, it's the absolute power of the state, and the absolute power of the state concentrated in just one angry, bitter dictator. This is extremely dangerous, but it also shows enormous weaknesses on so many fronts. The idea that you just don't have 1.5 million uniforms, that's just a drop in the bucket compared to the guns that you don't actually have, the planes that you claim to have that don't actually fly or don't actually even exist, the amount of trained soldiers that you said you have that maybe you don't even have at all. It is all a lie. Yes, I know that Vladimir Putin rides horses shirtless and he has sex with bears, and it's all bullshit. It's tiny, weak, bitter little man that has never had a single honest job in his life, always working as an agent for the state in some of the more twisted, sadistic ways, but that's all he is. Now, he's extremely dangerous nonetheless. He's not an idiot, even though he did one massive miscalculation. And before I start with the video, the massive miscalculation that he did, and we talked about this with Matt before, even before they invaded Kiev, and we actually both agreed, which we have some points in which we don't agree in terms of the war in Ukraine. Now, this is something that we both agreed with. We both agree that, no, they cannot invade Ukraine, the entire country, because it's impossible. It's just too big. There's just too much people, and you don't have the manpower to do that, even with the official bullshit numbers you claim to have. Now, this is why you see the lack of uniforms, the lack of training. You see the soldiers stealing stuff and just running back home or whatever they can do. The idea that these people are gonna, I mean, thousands mobilized are undeemed fit. Now, this is coming straight out of Russian authorities. Mikhail Degnerov, the governor of Kharkov region in Russia's Far East, said several thousand men had reported for enlisting in the last 10 days, but many were ineligible, right? About half of them were returned home as they did not meet the selection criteria for entering the military service, said Degnerov. And that's a lie on itself. That's also a lie. You know why it's a lie? Because yes, it is true that they're not deemed for service, but when you dig, when you go deeper, you realize that they are still being sent to fight even though they're deemed unfit. More on that later. But this is the kind of thing that you see when you have a sham of a country. Look at this. This is, I mean...
Russian President Vladimir Putin's military, once feared, now mocked. No laughing, the officer says to her recruits. Ask your wives, girlfriends, mothers for period pads and tampons. Do you know what tampons are for? You stick it in a bullet wound, she says, it swells and closes the wound. Bring your own sleeping bag too, the men are told.
Bring your own sleeping bag to fight in winter in Ukraine? They don't have the uniforms, they don't have the sleeping bags, they're being told, I mean, this is the kind of stuff you read in survivalist forums, like, yeah, if you're bleeding out, you put a tampon. Do you want to have a clogged tampon in a gunshot wound while fighting Ukrainians? I mean, yeah, sure, if you have nothing else, if you're bleeding out, pack it with fucking dirt, but to have that from the most feared and most advanced military in the world, this is the lie, that is Russia. Packing a gunshot wound with a tampon. And this is also
on television,
part of
the hundreds of thousands being mobilized by President Putin are well equipped.
This is what the Russian government shows. Yes, you have AKs, you have body armor.
In reality, their videos on social media tell a different tale. We were officially told that there would be no training before being sent to the combat zone, this recruit says. We had no shooting, no tactical training, no theoretical training, nothing.
They're being sent to the front without any training at all whatsoever. Now, when they did that in Kiev, when every able-bodied human was basically picking up a gun and they were just distributing those in the streets because the Russians were attacking, that's a completely different scenario. You're fighting for your survival. So whoever can pull a trigger is giving a gun. And I would do the exact same thing. Now, when you're a demented commie dictator that is invading another country, the miscalculation was he thought this guy would quit. He thought that where is he? Where are you? There you. Little Zelensky would just give up. And little Zelensky said, fuck off. I'm not leaving. When he was told, and he was offered a taxi by the U.S. government, kind of convenient anyway, when he was offered the taxi and he asked for more ammunition in that tweet or whatever that he sent, and everyone went, oh, what, you got balls, man, you're staying. That was the point. That is the difference between a man that is so many times criticized, and he's not even all that great of an actor, but he's an actor. He had at least an honest job at some point in his life, right? Before being elected president of the country. The difference between him is that in the critical moment when he was supposed to leave, this is what Vladimir Putin was this is why this mess is unfolding right now. Zelensky was supposed to leave as soon as he saw those tanks rolling straight for Kiev and the regime would be replaced. He would have another puppet. Putin would have another puppet. This is, the psychology of people. People think that everyone is like them when they're not. So Putin thought that, yes, I'm this way, and the people that are my lapdogs are this way as well. So yes, they will do what lapdogs usually do. They just leave. When there's a little bit of pressure, when his own lapdog in Kiev saw a little bit of pressure in the public square, he jumped on a plane and left the country. He thought that Zelensky would do the same thing. He was never counting on actually going for a full-scale invasion and war. It was supposed, he said it himself, it was supposed to be a special military operation. He was actually counting on it, even though he knows there's nothing special about it. But in his mind, in his rebuilding of the Soviet Empire, he was counting on it really being a special military operation. The special military operation is, we're going to be making a change here, and we're going back to the good old days. Like in Belarus, we'll have our puppet. And the man said, fuck off. No, we're staying here and we're fighting. And everyone rallied behind him.
Another officer addresses his recruits. If you have hernias, plates in your head, I was told you're fit for mobilization, he says, so stop saying you can't. I live on pills, so if I go, you'll be doing your tasks like everyone else.
They're dragging unfit people for combat. They're dragging people that don't have any kind of training. And sure, there's probably some veteran there that knows how to put a trigger. There's probably some Russian there that actually fought somewhere. And, the thing is, any Russian professional soldier that was, probably worth something was already sent. So if they're not replacing them with these people, maybe they're not here anymore. Maybe that's where their uniforms are missing. They have, as someone said in Twitter, maybe they're missing because they have a Russian inside the uniform. So when you're dragging people, they're dragging people out of anti-war protests. They're dragging people out of occupied territories. More on that later. They're dragging all of these people and throwing them into what Ukrainians themselves are describing as a meat grinder. How do you think that war will go on? On the other hand, what are Ukrainians doing? Well, stuff like this. So, yeah, sure, propaganda, right? Yes. It's still, the fact that you can even think about doing something like this in the middle of the war, well, I think it's kind of funny. It just shows, it just really, and if you see, I've seen hundreds of little clips of both sides. I do read the Russian propaganda as well, even though I don't allow it in my channel, because I'm not supporting Vladimir Putin or any commie or any socialist, not from Argentina, not from Venezuela, or fucking Russia. I don't care. I don't support communism and socialism in any shape or form, because that's what basically caused me to leave my own country. So when there's any of that, I don't allow it. But this kind of thing just shows the morale that these guys have. When you're fucking around like this, when you're bullshitting like this, and yes, of course, they're dying by the thousands, but notice something else. Notice the gear. Notice the helmet. New stuff, right? And one of the things I learned watching so many of these clips, YouTube is a wonderful source if you know what to look for. There's so many Americans that are just crowdfunding and collecting money and flying over there and just getting money and equipment. They have armor, they have the guns, they have the gear, they have the support from all of the West, basically, while these guys cannot even get their own people to fight for his war, right? Their own people, they're escaping, they're going to the borders. There's hundreds of thousands of Russians that have escaped Russia. They don't want to fight. And I understand it. I mean, I get it. Of course they don't. But the people they're forcing to fight, they're turning on their own forces. Look at what's happening, even with
CNN cannot independently verify these widely circulated videos. Even the deputy prime minister of the Donetsk People's Republic,
this guy, yes, you can verify he is who he says he is.
Annexed Friday by Russia, couldn't help but be honest as the city of Liman fell to Ukrainian forces. The situation on the Liman front is bad. Let's speak frankly, he tells a Russian propagandist. Everything is the same as everywhere else, namely, there are not enough people. The sorry
they are admitting themselves. I mean, you have the man admitting themselves they don't have enough people. If you ran out of people, what happened with the people that you used to have? Were they all burned in those little furnaces that Putin's army was dragging so as to burn the corpses, as the propaganda says? Well, they're not there anymore. And if they ran out of people and they're dragging people that don't want to fight the war, I mean, it's overwhelming. The great majority of people being sent to the front to fight these guys don't even want to be there. You're sending men that don't want to fight these guys that are fighting for their own country, that are as motivated as any video that you see that is slightly even objective, shows a level of morale in Ukraine that, as you would, in spite of all the horrible losses and the tragedy that it's been so far, and it will continue to be. The morale is completely different from one side to the other. The supply, the training, the gear that they have, completely different.
State has tainted the hallowed hall.
And this is from RT. This woman works directly for RT Media.
Of Russian state television, where careful skepticism about Putin's war is increasingly tolerated. This time, it's the head of the state-owned RT network.
The head of RT network.
If I had to gather trainloads of body armor, socks, and the rest for those already on the front line, she asks, have these 300,000 been supplied with all that they need?
No.
These recruits in the central city of Perm clearly haven't. They lament being dropped by the side of the road late at night, saying they'll have to build a fire to stay warm.
So they are admitting themselves that they don't have the men, they don't have trained men, they don't have men that want to fight. So even within Russia, they're looking for excuses as of why we're losing this thing, which is what's happening right now. I mean, you're still talking about a communist regime with one single dictator making all decisions. At least so far, this could collapse from within. Usually commie regimes do that. They collapse from within because they are a lie on a essential level. Communism and socialism is a lie on itself. So that's why it usually collapses on its own. And failed states always. This time we'll get communism right. No, you won't. So they're looking at reasons. They're not saying they're winning this. They're not saying they're making any progress. They're looking for excuses as of why we're losing. Oh, we don't have enough equipment. Oh, we have to send men to the front with rusted AKs and not even winter clothes. You don't even have winter clothes in Russia for fighting in Ukraine. I mean, how did you even train these people? But we go back to the bullshit. We go back to the lie where they probably didn't even have most of the stuff they claim to have because they stole it, because they stole their money and never got it, never produced it, never bought it.
The impact is plain to see. Ukraine recaptured more territory in the past month than Russia had gained in the past 5.
That is overwhelming, all right? They've regained more in the past month than Russia claimed in the past 5 months. And, just to end this, and this is just an example of how Putin is failing, and even the Chechens themselves are turning on him. The people that come from a much smaller country, I think it's like 1 million people, and they were conquered by Russia basically with help from traitors from within.
They are some of the most fierce, most feared soldiers in the world.
A lot of people in the United States, in Europe, everywhere in the world, they still believe that we are some crazy radicals, that we are barbarians.
But these Chechen...
Some of you guys are. I get it that it's not all of you, but some of you, yes, are.
...fighters shared this video from the front lines. Evidence, they say, that reputation is wrong.
Slava Ukraine, these Chechen soldiers are saying. They're fighting for Ukraine now.
Pointing to these clips of Ukrainians cheering as they help to liberate the occupied town of Izum. This young soldier telling me, it means that we're fighting on the right side. We are fighting for the truth. It means for me that people can live a normal life, something they never had in Chechnya. Decades of resistance ending with Russian troops taking control of their ravaged homeland.
They destroy each Chechenian village, each Chechenian city, and we don't have...
That's terrible. They destroy that country. They slaughter those people. They bomb them into submission because that can work, especially when it's overwhelming. Now, as we said before, in the case of Ukraine, it's just too big, too much people, too much support. It's not like taking over Georgia or Transnistria in Moldova or Chechnya. No, this is different. But they did that to the Chechens. Even though Chechens are still fighting, man. Even though Chechens, they took a school and ended up in a horrible massacre. But those guys are still trying to fight, even though it's much smaller.
Have any family who don't lost brother, mother, sister, father, grandfather.
That loss and...
That's what Russia does. Whenever you have these guys, oh, Russia's actually great. No, this is Russia.
Horror mirrored in the battered towns and villages, the constant attacks and atrocities unfolding in Ukraine. The commander of the unit, now leading troops to war for the 3rd time against Russia, and never more confident that they will win, saying, we are surely going to, because the whole world is behind us and supports us. There is, though, little if any support from the place they were forced to leave.
I'm not happy that people with same blood, with same language dying on the other side.
Thousands of Chechens have been drafted or volunteered, now fighting alongside Russian troops, highlighted by the leader of the Chechen Republic's threatening comment.
This is the bastard that betrayed his own people. You know, a little gangster, you know, a little thug that turned on his own people and sided with the invaders, sided with Putin.
This weekend in support of Vladimir Putin.
Traitor is more dangerous than Russian soldiers.
This guy is smart. Traitors are more dangerous than Russian soldiers. Keep that in mind.
Because this traitor, he betrayed our nation, he betrayed our culture, and he just want to killing all of us.
He betrayed our nation, he betrayed our culture. Careful with traitors, guys.
They are willing to risk their lives for that culture, and they say, an even bigger cause.
We fight for our freedom.
All right, Jay Gray joins Top Story tonight from...
Okay, guys, you get the picture, right? I think it's quite clear. Now, is this, oh, everything is great, Ukraine will win? No, this could last for years. And when you have a man that has nuclear bombs, you just don't know how far he will go with that. Now, I will say that there's a very small chance of this World War III thing. There's just no local support. I mean, you can push a button, or you can get one of your dogs to push a button and do something horrible, right? But when you don't have the support of your own country, you cannot go to a third world war when you're about to be kicked out of your own country, like it's in the case of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin does not have the support of his own people. You know, his own men don't want to fight this war. So you cannot start third world war with that. You can drop a few nukes. Yeah, you can do that. But let's see how long you can do that before your own people just decides one day to storm whatever hole you're hiding in and hang you from the neck until you die. Folks, see you on our next video. Take care.